Hey y'all, my name is Nicole Cagna and I am the host of DominionTV's Ask the Prophet, where we actually answer the hard questions. When the Lord designed this show, He wanted it to be a safe place where His church and His bride could ask the hard questions without judgment. And the last couple of years, we have obliged. Watch us live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Dominion TV. And don't forget to download the app and become a partner. You will never regret sewing.
Thank you for tuning in and watching Dominion TV today. If you have the app, I need you to take a moment and go to your settings and turn on the notifications for our app. When you do that, you're going to get updates such as any special live events going on here in the Dominion TV studio and other things happening at the Dominion TV network. I need you to go to your settings, turn on your notifications for the Dominion TV app today. And while you're in the app, we have a brand new feature where you can submit prayer requests right in the app. When you get to the home page, there's a button right to the right that says prayer request. When you click that link, it's going to take you to a form where you can fill out all of your information. If you'd like to have one of our intercessors contact you, we will do that, but we want to hear from you. We love hearing from you. If you have a testimony, if you want to let us know that you're watching, that you were blessed by one of our broadcasters, just go submit your information on the prayer request form. Just let us know that you're watching and enjoying Dominion TV. Blessed.
Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Nicole Cagna and you are watching Ask the Prophet only on Dominion TV. And we have a wonderful, wonderful show for you today, a wonderful topic about healthy marriage and what it is. And I think it's important to always have the balance between things that aren't of God and then things that are of God, because we never want to go too far one way or too far the other, meaning we don't always want to talk about what is wrong, right? We also want to talk about what is healthy. So it's not just what something doesn't look like, it's what something should look like. You see, it's easy to tear things down, but a balanced ministry doesn't just tear and up, it doesn't just uproot something that needs to be uprooted. It also plants. And that is the balance, right? We see this even in Elijah and Elisha. We see the double portion where Elisha did a lot of creative miracles and a lot of things like that, even more so that was healing. And I think that's important that we have that prophetic balance when we're answering questions. And so what does, and this is the question that we're answering because it balances the week before, or I should say the 2 weeks before. And so what the question is this: how do I have a healthy marriage that thrives rather than just survives? And that's when I say that's a loaded question, it's not because there's 5 different parts to it like some questions have, but I would say that we have to look at marriage as something seasonal. And so when your kids are little, you surviving half the time. Sometimes parenthood just looks like that. Like sometimes you're not going to have the 5-course meal at dinner, and sometimes you're going to feel like ships passing in the night. And you feel like that when your kids are little and you try to have a conversation with your husband and you hear mom, mom, mommy, mommy, mama, mama, mom, mom, and you're like, you start twitching a little bit. I remember one day I was like, I'm going to change my name. I was like, I think I had just been like all mommied out and touched out. And I was like, I'm going to change my name. And my husband busted out laughing. He's like, you are hilarious. I was like, I'm going to change it. I'm going to get me in the car. And he starts cracking up. And Christian was like, well, what are we going to call you? I said, call me somewhere else. I don't know, someplace on an island. with a virgin pina colada and some white sand and clear ocean, that you could call me there. That's what you could call me. And we were joking around, but it really kind of highlighted sometimes where you're like, don't say my name anymore. Don't say my name. The cats are meowing, you're hearing mom, you're trying to have a conversation with your spouse. It could be a lot. And so sometimes there are seasons in marriage where you're surviving, in the sense that you guys are in the trenches together. And it doesn't mean the marriage is barely surviving. What it means is that in parenthood, you're surviving. You're like, okay, this is what we have. And so it's important in those moments to understand that marriages go through seasons, and you can't judge your marriage based on somebody else's season. And also, you can't do that with somebody else's partner. So be grateful for the partner that you have, and focus on your own lawn, right? And understand that, if you're looking at a couple that's in their 40s or 50s, and maybe they have grandchildren, maybe they had kids they were younger, you cannot expect of yourself the same exact look or freedom that they may have to come and go as they please. Whereas, if you had children later in life, you're not going to be operating the same way, because if you have children that are, 10, 11, 12, 13, that they're still very much still needing their parents. They're still needing their parents involved. They're not, 20-year-olds or 25-year-olds away at college where they still need you, but they don't need you as much. And so I think that the first step in understanding what a healthy marriage looks like is first recognizing that there's various seasons. And I always like to say that to begin with. The second thing that I want to share is that this message is not for people who are in abusive marriages, that this message on marriage happens to be for marriages that are healthy, and how to have a healthy marriage, even if you're in a difficult marriage. But it certainly doesn't, this is not for people in abusive marriages. That's not a marriage issue. That is a sin problem on the behalf of the abuser. The reason why I have to make disclaimers like this all the time is because the people who want their marriages oftentimes to work the most, believe it or not, are victims of abuse, because they simply just want the guy that they thought they had from the beginning. And that's a whole other psychology that we're not going to be dealing with today, because we've dealt with that enough. And now I want to focus on healthy marriage and what that looks like. So let's look at 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 through 13. And it says, "If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but do not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it'll pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now, we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love." This happens to be one of my absolute favorite scriptures, because I really think that it actually sums up the gospel perfectly, and it sums up relationships in the body of Christ. It sums up relationships in marriage. It sums up healthy relationships overall, but it also is a blueprint. It's a blueprint of how to recognize those who are for us and those who aren't. And it also helps us recognize how we are to behave. It allows us to take responsibility for our own actions. And so, one of the things that a healthy marriage requires is communication and clear expectations, because love and communication, it looks like something. Okay. This is not the like, you can't expect somebody to say, are you okay? And this typically happens where a husband will be like, are you okay? And the wife's like, I'm fine. I'm fine. I never understood that. And maybe it's because I don't know. I grew up with very direct women and direct men in my family lineage. If somebody had something to say, they just say it. Like there's no subterfuge. There's no, going around anything. It's bullseye every time. And so imagine my surprise when I would counsel couples and she would be like, well, he should know what I'm feeling. I'm like, is he telepathic? Like, I mean, how else is he going to know how you're feeling if you don't tell him? So communication looks like something. You can't expect somebody to meet you where you are if you're not telling them. It's kind of like a GPS locator on your phone. You have to let your partner know where you are, and vice versa. And of course, this can happen in the opposite way, but typically from what I've seen, it usually happens in that way. And I would say, I'm sorry, but that's not fair. That is not fair. You're holding him up to an unfair standard because you're expecting him to respond. You're expecting him to respond in a certain way, but you're not expressing what the problem is. And that's a game to be like, I'm fine, and make somebody chase after you. I to be honest with you, I don't play that. It's a waste of time. And in fact, it's one of the things my my husband will tell me that he loves about me. He's like, you know what I love about you? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you love about me? And he's like, you're a great communicator. He's like, I never have to guess where you're coming from. You express your emotions. You are calm. You're very, he's like, you're direct, but you're also very clear about what it is that you're feeling, and you work things out. He's like within you, and then you bring it. He goes in, and I love that because I think that's such a healthy thing, and he does the same. And so that's kind of what we've cultivated in our marriage, because we love each other. And so because we love each other, why would I want to play some sort of game? I don't ever want to do that. And you shouldn't either, honestly. I mean, healthy marriage looks like being honest. You're best friends. I mean, at least that's how we are. We're best friends. We laugh, we laugh till we cry. We just love being around each other. And I think that the reason why is because we cultivate that with communication. Okay. Healthy marriage requires understanding that our spouses are ever changing and leaving space for growth. And we'll get into all these more in depth. I'm just giving you the quick list first, the overall list, the short answer, as I like to call it. Healthy marriages also require an understanding of seasons. And that's kind of what we were talking about in our opening. You're looking at somebody going away on their 25th wedding anniversary, and you've been married maybe 10 years, and, you've been unable to take a vacation because you're raising little kids and it's expensive. And so, you may look at that and go, gosh, I wish I was doing that. But I'm sure when they were in the trenches like you are now, they wished that they could go away too. And so again, we have to understand the season that we're in so we don't charge our partner foolishly. I've seen this happen. I hate to say it, but I've seen it happen when women give birth. Um, a lot of times it takes about, I would say, a full year for the body to heal, sometimes even 2 years, depending on how traumatic the birth was. And if you have a spouse, I remember sitting with a couple and I was like, oh, Lord Jesus, don't say it, sir, in my head, because I just knew. I could tell and I discerned. And, we kind of knew some of the issues. And so my husband and I are there, and he's comparing about how other women work out and how other women exercise and how other women go to the gym. And I love my husband. My husband straight up said, and how are you supporting her to reach that goal? And he was like, well, what do you mean? I work and come. He goes, so to be clear, you get to come and go as you please, but she doesn't. And so you're punishing her for having the weight gain that comes natural because she gave you a family, but yet you're not willing to be a parent in the evenings so she could go exercise. My husband's like, that's a you problem. I'm like, I didn't laugh, but in my head, I was like, go ahead, sir. Like, I was like, oh, like, you just, oh, just sometimes you'll, and his face kind of got, but he needed somebody else to call him out. And so because all I do is I just look over like, go ahead, honey, whatever you got, what advice could you give as an amazing husband and father that you are? What do you have to say to that? And he said it. He said it. And so, understanding that season was understanding that she's exhausted. And by the way, if she doesn't have the energy to exercise until the child is 2 years old, then you support her through that. And if she wants to, you support her through that. But the point is that you can't compare somebody who has tweens who are able to go to the gym and have a little bit more freedom to somebody who has a 1 and a 2-year-old. You can't do that. It's just not right. First of all, it's not right. Don't ever do that. If there's any gentleman watching, like, please don't do that. Save yourself. Don't do that. Don't do that. And it requires sacrifice, healthy marriage, right? Yielding to one another. And healthy marriages require quality time and physical touch, and not speaking sexually, by the way. Yes, sex is very important in marriage, of course, very important. But physical touch, non-sexual physical touch, is also extremely important. It has to do with cherishing, because you're letting your spouse know, hey, I see you. Hey, I love you. And for me, growing up, I was always like a mover. And I asked my mom, I said, Mom, was I affectionate growing up? And she was like, you wouldn't necessarily initiate it. She goes, ever, but you received it. So I didn't initiate physical touch because it just didn't occur to me. It was not part of my makeup. I'm more acts of service. I like to do, if I love you, I want to do things for you. So, but my husband's love language is also a physical touch, and that does not include sex. I always take that out, because that's just part of a healthy marriage. Like, you put that separate on the table, because I think that what could happen is it can get messed up, and then you're sending a message every time you touch your spouse that you have to engage in something. And so you might not touch your spouse because you're afraid that that there'll be an expectation. You don't want to do that, which is why I say lots of hugs, lots of hand holding. I learned, for me, to slow down. And I first, I had to be cognizant of it when we were first married, because I realized sometimes I could go a whole day and not hug, when we were first married, not hug him, even though I loved him and was super attracted to him. I would be so busy doing things for him. And I had to realize, okay, that might not be the way that he receives it. And so I began to make sure that I, as somebody who just doesn't think about that, because my brain has 100 tabs open, I was intentional about affection. And now, nearly 20 years later, it's so natural that as soon as he comes home, I cannot wait to give him a huge hug and love on him. And just like, it's just like, it's just great. It's healthy for our bodies to be, hugging our spouse, to greet them, whoever comes home first. If it's the wife that comes home first, greet your husband. If it's the husband that comes home first, greet your wife. There's something special about giving each other the biggest hug, and not just like a 2-second hug and a kiss, but like a lingering hug. Let your children see that. My son will see that and he'll go, oh, here we go. All the time. We're like, guys, you're always flirting. That's what he calls it. You're always flirting. And I'm like, well, after 20 years, you best hope that you find somebody that you ask Jesus for, your partner. And when you get that partner, you're going to be flirting for a very long time too, until your last breath, because that's what healthy marriages look like. So he sees that a lot, and he's like, guys, because he's of that age, he's going to be 13, and sometimes he'll run and join in the family hug, and we'll do like a big old family hug because we're kind of dorky like that. But it's important to make sure that you're physically touching your spouse outside of sexual connection. And so healthy marriages also need emotional safety in order for intimacy to occur. So it can't just be a physical safety. It has to be emotional. And I know that that's very difficult, because sometimes people get defensive, and you have to understand that it is not you against your spouse, it's you and your spouse against whatever is trying to create division. And sometimes that means there's something in the way that you grew up or something in the way that they grew up that you need to overcome. Healthy marriages require God as the center, big time. That there's really no other way. God as the center. Okay. Healthy marriages require empathy and compassion, not criticism or competition. And healthy marriages require a leave and cleave mentality. And this is especially true with husbands, because a lot of times mother-in-laws, especially if they have an only child, and I'm very aware of this, that I have, just my son, and that I am a boy mom, and I know that he's going to get married, and I know that, that there's boundaries. And I think that that's important, and that's the way that's healthy. And I encourage him to do that, because I am not going to be that person. I don't want to be responsible for creating an issue. And so we have to have wisdom in that area as well. So now let's start digging a little bit deeper. This is definitely a 2-part series for sure, maybe even 3, because I really want to give you practical tips here. So when it comes to communication, we know that the foundation of all communication is love. That is the foundation. So if you start from the premise of love, you will always win. I have never been, for me personally, I'm not a yeller. I just, it's not in me. I've never, like, I don't, even if I argue, my tone usually would be like this. If I disagree, it's very logical. I don't react, I would say. I'm not that person. I probably take after my father, because he's the same. We're actually kind of twinsies in a lot of those areas. And so we're processors. And so I'm a processor. So I don't always emotionally respond if something is bothering me right away. I don't at all. In fact, if there's something that my spouse says that, bothers me or whatever, I'll process it first with the Lord. I want to show you how to do this, because this will help you. I'm a processor, and I know that about me. So when we first got married, if we disagreed on something, it would take me time to process what I felt about a conversation or whatever it was, because I wanted to make sure that I was articulating my thoughts and that I was not, doing one of these kind of things. And I think that's important. So I'm logical. So I said, okay, you know what? Let me sit with the Lord. Let me sit and let me ask the Lord what's happening with me. So that way I have a greater understanding. Is it my filter? Meaning, is this the way that I received it? So is it a me thing? Is it the way that I'm seeing it? Or is it the way that it was said? And those are 2 very different things. And before you go, you want to, you love your spouse, you want to sit and you want to understand. So the first thing I ask is, what to myself is, what am I feeling, Lord? And the first emotion for me is usually angry or frustrated. And so that's what I call a blanket emotion, which happens to many people. So we call anger, we call frustration, all of that is part of what we know as a blanket emotion. And underneath is something else. That's why you should never respond immediately. So if something hits your spirit a little bit or your flesh a little bit, and you're like, you have to decide why and what before you even try to communicate. Otherwise, it's just going to be a mess, and it's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your energy, and it's not the way to build an intimate emotional connection. So I take responsibility for my own feelings by going to my Father, and my Father in heaven. And I say, what am I feeling? And so I don't want my communication to reflect that initial feeling again, because it's a blanket. So after I sit with the Lord, I share about, what am I feeling frustrated or angry about? And then I dig further into the issue. And most of the times it's because I will feel hurt about me either being misunderstood or something along those lines. And so once I understand, okay, that's what that is. So then my second step is saying, am I triggered? Is this something that's a trigger? If so, why? If not, if it's not a trigger and it's something that is the way that my spouse said it, then how can I communicate my needs in a healthy way? When those rare times occur, because I have to be honest with you, and I'm going to be completely honest, it doesn't happen often in our marriage, just because we're very intentional, honestly, and we're very compatible, and we pray together and we seek the Lord together on things. So really we're on the same page a majority of the time. And the small percentages when we're not, sometimes it's him, sometimes it's me. And when those times occur, I make sure that I pray for clarity over my own heart first. Always search within first. The flesh is to look at your spouse and go, it must be you. Don't do that. Humility is always the way forward in a marriage. And if both parties examine their own heart first, that is the best way to start. You go to your father, you examine your heart. Lord, is it me? I have to make sure. So this is what my responsibility is, and it's your responsibility. We have to make sure that we're not connecting a past trauma or a past event with the current event, because now that's different from a pattern of behavior. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that there's something that's been bothering you, okay, but you don't say it. Or maybe you say it, but there's something that bothers you, and now there's something else and something else, and now you're putting all three things in one, and you're connecting it, and then you're coming across to your spouse like, and you did this, and they were like, what, wait, what, when was that, like a month ago? Like they didn't even remember because you never talked to them about it, but you've been keeping score. And so now you're keeping score. When you blow up, you're not blowing up at the event that is current that's bothering you, the issue that's bothering you. You're really blowing up about the 5 issues before, connected to number 6. You see the difference? And that resentment that builds is unhealthy, which is why you have to make sure that you're not connecting something past with present, that you're not making somebody, quote unquote, pay for their sin twice, if you will. This is different than a pattern of behavior. So let me give you an example. In essence, this means if you have a spouse, guys, who makes promises and then he doesn't keep them or she doesn't keep them, that breeds mistrust. And it's a destructive pattern in the marriage, and that makes it hard to trust. But if your spouse made a promise and forgot about it one time, and you're triggered because you might have had a parent who never came through for you, you are then creating a scenario where your spouse is paying for the sins of your father or your mother. I know that's deep. And I know that that's where a lot of people don't want to see it. Hello, I'm seeing some of y'all. Hello, guys. Good to see you. Bless y'all. Bless, bless, bless. So, and my aunt's on here too. Hello. And so, the reason why I want to share this with you guys, and this is deep, is because if you have a rejection spirit or you have experienced rejection, sometimes you could be viewing through that lens. So let's say a wife comes home and she's in a rough mood, and she's not, saying hello or showing affection. It might be where you look at that as a husband and say, I'm rejected. And you're connecting it to maybe times where your mom came home and she didn't have any energy left for you. And that could trigger that. If you're a woman whose father never showed up, and he would make promises and couldn't keep them, maybe if your husband accidentally forgets something, you're then charging him for that. So you don't want to do that. So you have to make sure that you're not making somebody else pay for the sins of the father or the sins of the mother or the family lineage that you come from. But similarly, if your husband or wife has a pattern of behavior where they make promises and don't keep them, then you have every right to feel the way you do, and you need to address that and perhaps even go to counseling, because you do need to be able to trust your partner. And if they quote unquote forget all the time and don't keep their word, then it makes you feel like you're not an important part of their lives. It makes you feel like you don't matter. And that could be, and they may not intend that, but that is the message. And so that's why you have to decide, is this something that I'm seeing incorrectly? am I seeing it through my own filter, or am I seeing it through patterned behavior that I need to address, that this is something that they continuously do and it's breeding mistrust, and I need to make sure that that stops. So that's important. Number three, how do you communicate your feeling in a way that honors both of you? So you have to decide, how am I going to communicate with my partner that honors my partner and that honors myself? And so that means being honest without accusation. You see how hard that is? I want you to eliminate these phrases from your vocabulary. I call these fighting words. Them's fighting words. Okay. Here are you always and you never. You never, you always. Sound familiar? Mm-mm, mm-mm. Eliminate it. Eliminate it, because these blanket statements that put your whole relationship on trial are not of God. That is a spirit of accusation and condemnation. Remember that you are when you're in a marriage, a covenant relationship, and you need to treat it with the honor that it deserves. This is the man or woman who loves you. Honesty with honor, always. What does that look like? How do we do that? Sometimes people need a script. I personally like instead of, well, you did this and you did. It's like, when this was said, it made me feel like I didn't matter. Or when this happened, it made me feel like I was an afterthought. And that really hurt me. I'm guarantee you that if you talk like that, rather than, you never put me first. Everybody is always first before me. That is like, that just immediately puts somebody on the defensive to argue with you. The idea is not to fight about feelings. The idea is the reconciliation of your two hearts as one. You have to have honor. Always honor your spouse. They are not your child. They are not your boss, but they are your partner. And when you love somebody, you treat your partner with honor. What are you responsible for? This is important. This means that you're not responsible how others feel about your feelings. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes, and especially, I notice that women will do this, is that they're afraid that if they bring something up, it'll start an argument. Bringing something up should never start an argument, because that goes back to the other area of not creating a safe space for your partner. If your partner can't be honest with you and they tiptoe around your feelings, then you are making your feelings an idol. And it's pride that you can't be told anything. And you better check your heart on that, because you're not responsible for how others feel about your feelings. So if you say that really hurt me, and they're like, wow, that makes me really sad that I did that, and all of a sudden it becomes about them, and they're like, see, I'm just so stressed out, and I'm just so, but meanwhile, they're not taking responsibility or reconciling. Instead, what they're doing is they're deflecting, and they're making you feel bad about bringing it up. So they're saying, well, I'm just stressed, I'm this. They're making excuses for the behavior that you're addressing. And that's gaslighting as well. Either that, or they'll convince you that it's not real. That's not healthy. So don't allow that. You hear? Don't allow another individual's discomfort to prevent you from communicating, because that's going to build resentment, which is how you end up in the other area where you're saying, you always do this, you never do that, because you're letting it build until you can't take it. And so, but if somebody comes to you and respectfully shares their feelings and does so in a way that is real and not accusatory, but the truth, and you don't like the truth, get over it. I'm just going to tell you, get over it. Suck it up, buttercup. And maybe that's harsh, but that's life. Like, there's no eggshells. Eggs are for breakfast. Ain't nobody walking on eggshells around you. Okay? You can't do that. If you have a problem with a spouse telling you that, you did something that hurt their feelings, then you need to examine your own heart as to why. And if you view that as criticism and rejection, then you need to examine why. That's a trigger for you to examine, not for your partner to tiptoe around. Okay. We could never trade triggers in truth. Okay. Truth is always the thing that has to be winning. The triggers don't get to make the decision. Truth does. Okay. Because truth is part of love. You can't have one without the other. Okay. So it's their responsibility to manage their own feelings. Now, prophetic people and discerners can struggle with this. Hello. Because I can, at least for me, always tell what's going on inside a person. And with well-intentioned meeting, we want to help manage it. So we want to be like, oh, that hurt your feelings. Let me help you with that, because we love, but we're not the Holy Spirit. And I remember sharing with my husband, and I said to him, always be honest with me. Even if I do something that hurts your feelings or makes you feel badly, tell me. Tell me, because it's my responsibility to manage my feelings and vice versa. And that was an agreement that we both made, because he and I tend to be hard on ourselves, very hard on ourselves. We're not hard on each other, but on ourselves. If one of us hurts the other, we're like, oh, like it's just like, oh, what's wrong with me? Kind of like we're very hard on ourselves. So we really don't even need each other to be hard on. But I just want him to know, hey, like your heart is safe here and I'm not going anywhere. So if I mess up, you tell me, because I don't want to walk around not knowing that. I don't want to. That's my responsibility to deal with me, just like it's your responsibility to deal with you. And that was an agreement that we made, but I brought it up because I was like, listen, please, this is what'll keep us healthy. And he's like, no, I agree with that. Yes. And so the fact that we're hard on each other, that's something that we have to work out with the Lord. And then the Lord shared the same thing with me, because both of us could be hard on ourselves, right? And then we show such grace to the other, but yet we have a hard time sometimes showing grace for ourselves. In fact, when we apologize to each other, my husband and I, we really mean it. Like our hearts long for the reconciliation. And I want to explain something to you. Practice apologizing to your children too, because we're not always going to get it right as parents. Like I am responsible for my responses. If I react and I get frustrated with my kid and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, blah 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 blah," and it hurts his feelings, that's on me. Even if the message was correct, the delivery might stink, and I'm responsible for that. So I make a concerted effort, and my husband does the same, that if we make a mistake or, don't communicate right or a little harsh in our communication with our son, which doesn't happen often, but when it does, I will grab my son. I will say, look at me in the eyes, and he'll look at me, and I'll take both of his hands and I'll say, I am sorry for reacting that way. My tone and was not acceptable. And while my messaging might be right, the way that I approached was a reaction rather than responding appropriately. And it's my job to regulate my own feelings. That's not on you. And doing that allows him to see, as a young man, how to apologize and what to do, and that adults can humble themselves, and that we're not always going to get it right. And so Chris and I, we like to model for him what it looks like, that, yeah, we may be in ministry, but we're not perfect, and we never will be. And that's okay. And we're going to make mistakes. And when we do, we say we're sorry, because I don't want my son to be 20 something years old without ever hearing me apologize or my husband apologize. That's just not God's way. It just isn't. And so we have to model this for our children, right? Absolutely. Yes. The always the response would be annoyance, Mims. Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. Yep. And that's the thing. Usually it's one, usually it can be us. And once we do it, and once we process it, we understand. And sometimes it's the tone. Sometimes the message is clear. So yesterday I was writing a blog, and I had been up with my son late at night. We were working on, he had a big essay, and, he had been working on it, and, my husband got home late, and Christian needed some assistance with something else. Like, we just were kind of working through it, and I was exhausted the other night. And then yesterday, after getting home from school, I needed to write this blog that the Lord wanted me to write. And the spirit was flowing, and I just needed some time. And, my little guy, he's not so little anymore, but he comes on in, and he's starting like around the office to grab some things that he needed. And I just was so like in my mind, I was so like, I just was like, I just need time, and so of course, annoyed, that would be my response too. And so I just was like, okay, leave, because I was like, leave the clipboard. I'm like, and just get whatever else you need. And just please, I need to concentrate. And the way I said it was very abrupt. It was like, ba, 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 like that kind of like a little short. But he was like, gee, Mom, I didn't come to ask you anything. I just came to grab like whatever. But I was just like, can I just have a hot minute? Like, can I have time to do what I need to do too, kind of thing. And it was just building within me. And so I made that decision to apologize. So I realized it. I finished whatever the Lord had me do, because the Lord was like, do what I'm asking you to do, and then reconcile. And so I come out at dinner, I grabbed his hands, and I said, listen, I said, I apologize. I reacted. I had way, way too much attitude. I said, and I said, I have way too much attitude. I'm saved. Don't get me wrong. I love Jesus. Don't get me wrong. But boy, I can, my tude, I get a little cut. I'm not a yeller. I've never have been, but I'm witty, and, and I could be a little, and so I could do that. And so I know that I always have to be mindful of it. And sometimes I'm like, oh, Lord Jesus, you better be thankful that this is not 25 years ago. Sometimes I think when people try to, come at, because I'm like, I could go up one side, you verbally down the other, without ever sinning, saying a bad word, just making you feel bad because I'm witty. But that's not how God wants me to use my words. So I have to speak life. So I apologize. I said, I was abrupt. I was short with you, and I had an attitude. I said, and I'm sorry for that. I said, let me say this also. In the future, there will be times where mommy's in the office, and you have to honor that as her workspace, and not bring your work in there, and not stand around or say hi, or, come in and interrupt every 5 seconds for things, because the Lord is having mommy do something. And so I'm going to let you know that in this tone of voice now, in the right way, that I needed to do better, and I didn't do it. I said to him, but I'm going to do better now. So do you understand that it's not a rejection if I say to you, when you come in, there's going to be times where you could do your homework in the office with me. He likes to be next to me in proximity. And I said, but there's going to be times where I need you to honor my space, and to honor that I can't be interrupted. I'm in a flow. And I don't, we live in an open concept house. I don't have a lot of space that I can go into with a closed door. And the office happens to be where I write, where, all of my things are. I have it set up, the green screen, everything. It's my space. I said, and if you enter my space, there's times where that'll be okay. And then there's times where it won't be. And I need you to accept that. And he's like, okay. He didn't like it. Of course not. He's a kid. He wants to what he wants, but he understood it. And he said, I forgive you. And because I said, do you forgive me for reacting rather than responding? And I go, here's my do-over. And I did it in a way that expressed things in a healthy manner. And he understood. And would you know that when I was doing my leadership academy last night at 7:30, right before I went in to set up for last night, he runs up and gives me the biggest hug behind me. And he's like, thank you for apologizing. And the Lord said to me, and I got choked up, of course, because I'm a mom. And the Lord's like, do you see what you did? You're teaching him how to reconcile. You're teaching him how to communicate, and you're teaching him humility. And, that's why you have to say, when you apologize to somebody, and that's the next point in a marriage of how to communicate. When you apologize, don't be like, well, listen, I'm okay. I'm sorry. That is not an apology. That is not an apology. You have to apologize in a way that shows the true change of mind, which is repentance. So I apologize for my tone when speaking with you. This is what that would look like. I apologize for my tone when speaking with you. I was frustrated over something else and I took it out on you, and that was wrong. That was not right. That was wrong. And I will be more mindful of my tone in the future, because I don't want to talk to you like that. I love you, and I am just so sorry that I hurt you. That's an apology, guys. That's the kind of apology that I give when I am sorry. And I never just say sorry, because if I'm not ready to say sorry, I don't do it. I process my own thing with the Lord. So if I'm like, I'm still hyped up on something, I process I work it out with Father God and Holy Spirit. And then, I'm able to articulate. So I don't bring it to somebody in its raw, messy state. I'm responsible for shaping it into something that can be received. That's how you know you're mature. Similarly, it lets the person know that you know what you did was wrong and that you understand why it hurt them. Because I think that a lot of times people will just say, I'm sorry for hurting you, or sorry that you feel that way. Or, did you ever hear that? Somebody say, I'm sorry that you feel that way. What? That's not an apology. What is that? That's no apology. You better get deliberate. Like, that's not like, I'm sorry that you feel that way. Well, that is not an apology. That is just blame shifting. That's gaslighting. That's saying, I'm sorry. I just had a bad day. That's, again, not an apology. That's called an excuse. Just because something has the word sorry in it doesn't mean that the tone and the surrounding words are supporting. Now, the other part of a healthy marriage is having expectations. And everyone has expectations, whether they realize them or not. So your partner may not know what those expectations are if you haven't communicated them. So, for example, I grew up in a way where the only time that we gave cards in my family were on birthdays. We exchanged cards, like graduation, or if it was money in a Christmas card, it would be that. But we never did, cards for Valentine's Day, Thanksgiving, Easter, unless it was like, with a little, little candy jelly beans or something. We just didn't. But my husband grew up in a family that did cards for literally every holiday and occasion. So when we first married, I remember feeling guilty when my husband purchased a card for me for Christmas, and it never crossed my mind. So we ended up meeting somewhere in the middle, and we exchanged cards on birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, and Valentine's Day. So we shared what those expectations were, because I didn't want him to feel rejected and he didn't want me to feel bad, because he just didn't know. He just was doing what he knew to do, and I was doing what I knew to do. And so now we met somewhere in the middle. So you have to have an expectation, because you have to understand that communication leads to understanding somebody else's expectation. Now, I also want to share that when Chris and I met, I never liked Valentine's Day. My birthday is February 16th. So February 14th, it was right around there. But I never liked Valentine's Day because it always felt so commercial. I can't stand heart jewelry. I never liked any of that, frilly nonsense. To me, it seemed like a horrible idea, um, filled with fake pressure. I'm just being honest. I know I'm not typical. In fact, I didn't even like anyone spending money on flowers and chocolate. I was like, flowers die. Chocolate makes me gain weight. Like, I don't need any of it. I just don't. Like, it's just not like, I don't like that stuff, I guess. I think flowers are beautiful, but we have cats and flowers die. I've always felt that way. It's just a waste of money. So to me, I shared with Chris, Valentine's Day was just a made up expensive day. And I preferred that we be intentional with each other on a daily basis. Because of our love, I didn't think that it was necessary that we just pick one day and try to pretend like it, like, to me, it just seems so fake. And that's okay if you feel differently. I would prefer that we just show love. I can't be bothered, I think, with some of that stuff. That's just my personality. I'm like, okay, I'm not spending $100 on a card. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not spending $30 on. I just no. Like, you know what? Let's go on vacation somewhere. Like, let's save up all the Valentine's Day money and let's go away on a beach. That's me. I'm happy with that. We don't need to celebrate one day. And my birthday's 2 days later. So it just didn't seem to matter. So that's what we agreed on. So, we still will share a card, just to let each other know that we love each other, but we don't celebrate it otherwise. And that's okay. So I was like, listen, please don't waste our budget on any of that. I don't care about it. It's fine. I love you. You love me. We can write something sweet and exchange a card just because we love each other. And I think it's beautiful to do that. But, I don't need, you don't have to ask, will you be my Valentine? Like, I don't need any of that nonsense. Like, we're together forever. So we're good. Like, we are best friends. So we're fine. And so that was the expectation. Now, what about sickness? We have to have expectations of that. When my husband is sick, he is not like the guy, they joke around. They're like, oh, if a guy gets sick, he has a man cold. My husband's not like that. He's very laid back, very easygoing. And so his go-to is to sweat it out in another room. That's his go-to. Meanwhile, me, I'm like, I want to make him soup. I make him tea. I'm like, take this medicine. Okay. Like, I turn into caregiver because that's acts of service. I want to do something for you. But I learned early on in our marriage that he didn't want that or expect me to take care of him. He just wanted 24 hours to sweat it out by himself. But meanwhile, I wanted to take care of him because I love to serve. So I remember early on in our marriage, I was like, but why won't you let me take care of you when you're sick? Because you take such good care of me when I'm sick. Why won't you let me do the same for you? And I thought it was because he didn't want to be a burden. That wasn't it at all. It was, he just had a method. He goes, but babe, it's just because I have a method that works for me. I've been doing this my whole life. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. And he wanted to stick with it. And I just had to learn to release it. I had to learn to this is how he wants to do it. It's about what makes him comfortable, not about what makes me comfortable. So I released that. And now he has that's what he does. And, every once in a while, if I see that he's not, taking his medicine, or if he forgot something, I'll come in and I'll go, drink some water, and he'll go, all right, and he'll take it and he understands. But, I don't push in any way. And so also household tasks. That's also part of the expectation. So it's important to understand that communication and expectations go hand in hand. So if your spouse grew up with a stay-at-home mom who did everything, but you grew up with two working parents, it's important to delegate labor. So Chris and I happened to grow up in households where both of our dads were active in childcare and household tasks. So for us, it wasn't a hard leap because my dad would, do dishes, vacuum. His father would come home after working an overnight shift and feed the babies so his mother could sleep in a little bit because she was home with the 4 kids all day. And so we both kind of grew up with everybody chips in, and pitches in and does what needs to be done. There were no gender roles or norms. And so for us, that wasn't a far stretch. And so it was just a matter then for us of creating a schedule of who would cook and when. So that could be seasonal too. So when I was home with Christian and Chris was working 2 jobs, I did dinner every night and he would do the dishes. I would give the baby a bath and a bottle. He would straighten up the toy room. Teamwork. But in no way would I expect my husband to make dinner after coming home at 7:00 and go, oh, it's your turn. The man just worked 2 jobs. I'll take care of that. That'll be my job in that season. But on the weekends, he would make breakfast for us. It wasn't even something, honestly, that we had to talk about then, but we did have to talk about it when Christian was older because I had no clue what was waiting for me in middle school. I was not prepared for the amount of work in AP courses that he would have, the after school clubs that he would join, sports, appointments, haircuts, life. And so there were more activities and appointments. And so I was the drop off person and the pickup person. And that's where Chris and I shifted with the season, because now as AP, he was getting home later. Sometimes he would have games at night. Sometimes he would have to cover a game on Saturday. And so everything would change. It was just became very busy very quickly. So I remember we began to talk about who can cook what and when during the week. So nights that he's working late, I cover the food. And when I have Leadership Academy or a night meeting, hubby takes care of that. We talk about what we're going to have for the week. We talk about the meal plan for the week and we write it down. We create a grocery list together and we go forward. And by the way, I don't know if any of you guys have Alexa, but I remember I used to get frustrated because I would make a list of what we needed. And then I remember he'd forget the list. And then I would take a screenshot. And then sometimes he'd forget to check his messages. And so finally I was like, ah! So I was like, we started to use Alexa as an example. And we would end up making this list and add things as we went along. So if something ran out, we would add it to the list on that app, and sure enough, he could pull it up, and it would just help both of us remember what we need to remember. So that's our start of it. We have more under expectations for part 2. And so we're going to get into that as well next week. We're going to continue with expectations because we covered communication. We're going to talk about seasons and growth. We're going to go into this deeply of how to have a healthy marriage. I don't want to gloss over this. I want to give you examples of what it looks like. It's very important. Okay. Very important. I'm just trying to keep track of my time. Yes, we still have 5 minutes, but what I want to do is I want you guys to really look at some of the things that I have just spoken to you about. Is there any way that you can improve the way you communicate with your spouse? Are there ways to share expectations or things that make you feel heard and seen? So let's say that you have a spouse. I'll give you an example. There are times where, because my husband gets up at 4:30. I don't know how he does it, but he does. He gets up at 4:30 in the morning. He's an early riser. I get up at 6:15. So we're a little bit different that way. But he's exhausted at night. And so I remember we would we would watch a movie, and he would just be like, yeah, we're talking, and the next thing you know, he's he's out. And and I'm and I remember struggling when we were first married with that, because I felt like, well, gee, he's not even awake. Like, am I boring or something? No, the man is just tired. So what we started to do is we started to talk more at the dinner table where we're eating and we're doing something. So we learn about each other's day. So that way, then we don't even watch TV now. But, then if we wanted to watch a movie or something, go ahead, fall asleep. We've already communicated, and I felt heard and he felt heard. And that made me feel better. But I remember thinking, oh no, my husband's falling asleep during the movie. So what my point is that have you accused your spouse of something, or maybe not shared that how something makes you feel? Or maybe you haven't shared, like, hey, I feel like I might be boring, or like it makes me feel bad. Do you think we can, talk at the dinner table more, or whatever it is, so that both parties are, simpatico. So ask yourself that. I'm going to give you that homework before we go into part 2 next week, and then possibly even a part 3. So I really want you to look and think of how are ways that you can improve your communication with your spouse, and what are expectations that maybe you have that are here that you have not verbalized, and how could you do so in a way that's honoring. That's your homework. Okay. And I'm also going to ask that you would share this broadcast so people know how to love and honor their spouses, because we want to do that. So into Dominion TV, because it is good soil. And so you want to partner with this television station for sure. It's not just me on here. There are plenty of other amazing ministers. So bless the people that run this. Okay. Bless the people that run this, because they are building something. All right. They are building an apostolic hub, and you want to support that. All right. And also, please feel free to email me at thebridalcallministries@gmail.com because I really would love to hear your feedback. Amen. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us today on Dominion TV. You are a part of Team Dominion as we carry the gospel of the kingdom into all the world. As you see behind me, we are building the new Dominion TV studios here at Lot 20. Of course, as we build, there are costs involved and our normal budget that must be taken care of. Also, we are believing for this $1.3 million project to be debt-free by the glory of God. Take a moment today and sow your best faith seed into this media missions ministry. And then remember to set up a recurring partnership seed and sow monthly to support 24/7 faith and kingdom broadcasting into over 170 nations and more. Thank you for your generosity and your support. Together, we are better. And together, we are going to see His kingdom come in all the earth. Thank you for your partnership.
This ministry is able to fulfill the mandate and command of Jesus to carry the gospel of the kingdom into all the world by the faithful support of people just like you. Give online at www.dominion.tv/giving. Here you will find various ways to give, including DTV's PayPal, Zelle, CashApp, and Venmo giving platforms. You can also securely give and partner with us with your credit or debit card and set up your weekly or monthly recurring seed. You can also give by text with your mobile phone. Simply text the word GIVE to 704-817-2843 and follow the prompts for giving securely. If you choose to mail your offering, you can send that to the ministry's mailbox at Dominion TV, 1000 South Commons Drive, Suite 102, Box 305, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, 29588. On behalf of our founders, Dr. Joseph and Dr. Lynette Dutton, may the Lord bless you richly is our prayer.